And for someone who was used to having your attention, your affection, your energy, it can feel like losing a mirror they relied on to see their own worth. So what do? They test. It might be subtle, a one-word text, a vague "how are you?", a random message late at night. Something casual that doesn't require a lot of effort on their end, but demands emotional effort from you if you respond. That's the first layer of control. They want to see if they still have you, not in a committed, loving way, but in a reactive, responsive way. Control in this context isn't necessarily malicious. It's often unconscious. It's about ego, insecurity, wanting reassurance without giving anything real in return. Because here's the truth, if someone really wanted to come back and make things right, you'd know. You wouldn't be guessing what a "hey stranger" text meant. You wouldn't be trying to decipher cryptic comments or social media breadcrumbs. They'd be clear, direct, and intentional. They'd talk about what went wrong, what they've learned, and what they're willing to do now. But when they're not offering any of that, and all you get is a vague poke after weeks or months of nothing, that's not clarity. That's control. That's them trying to reset the dynamic just enough to make sure they still matter to you. And here's the part that stings. If you respond, especially enthusiastically or emotionally, they get their answer. They may not even continue the conversation. Sometimes they disappear again after that one message. Why? Because their need wasn't for connection. It was for confirmation. Confirmation that you're still emotionally available. That even after silence, after space, after heartbreak, you still respond to their spark. That's not love. That's leverage. People who truly want clarity about where things stand, about what's possible, come forward with more than just a message. They come forward with accountability, with vulnerability, and with a plan. They don't breadcrumb. They don't test. They express. So when someone tests you after no contact, it's usually because they've lost the upper hand and they want it back. They want to feel like they're still on your mind, that they still hold some space in your heart, even if they don't intend to do anything with that space. Think about the pattern. If someone disappears on you and then comes back just enough to stir you up emotionally, but not enough to commit or communicate meaningfully, it's not about a relationship. It's about re-establishing emotional dominance. If they can get you wondering, waiting, second-guessing again, they've taken back a little piece of control. And this is where it becomes so important to understand your own worth. Because when you go no contact, it's not just about cutting someone off. It's about reclaiming your peace, your focus, your boundaries. It's about taking your power back, not to punish the other person, but to protect yourself. And when they test that boundary with a casual message, a flirtatious DM, or a vague check-in, they're testing whether your boundary was real or just temporary. Many people get confused in this phase. They think, maybe he's changed. Maybe he just needed time. Maybe this is his way of trying to start fresh. And sure, it could be. But you don't determine that by the fact that he reached out. You determine it by how he shows up after that initial test. Is there follow-through, consistency, effort? Or does he disappear again once he's confirmed you're still responsive? That pattern of pulling away, then testing, then disappearing is all about control. It's about reasserting emotional influence without offering emotional security. It's about reigniting your hope just enough that you start slipping back into the role of pursuer, of overthinker, of waiter. Because if you're waiting, you're not moving on. And that's the outcome that gives them the most power. You have to see that for what it is. Not through rose-colored glasses, not through nostalgia, but through clarity. Ask yourself, if this message didn't come with history attached to it, if it was just some random person sending it, would it feel valuable? Would it feel like something worth disrupting your peace over? Most of the time, it wouldn't. It only feels significant because of the emotional story you've already lived. But someone testing you after silence isn't continuing that story. They're trying to rewind it just enough to feel like they still matter in your world. Not because they're offering you something real, but because they're afraid of being irrelevant to you altogether. He's looking for validation, not reconnection. Expanded, it's one of the most confusing moments after a breakup or a period of silence. You've been doing your best to move on. Maybe you've even started to feel like yourself again, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, he messages you. It might be something small. Hey, just thinking about you. Or maybe, that song we used to listen to came on today. Sometimes it's even more subtle, like a like on your photo. a random reaction to your story, or some inside joke he's hoping will land the way it used to. And naturally, your heart skips a beat, because if you still have feelings, or even just unfinished emotional business, any form of contact can feel like hope. It feels like maybe he's realizing what he lost. Maybe this is the beginning of a new chapter. Maybe he wants to try again. Maybe he wants to try again. But here's where you have to be brutally honest with yourself. Is he actually reaching out to reconnect, or is he just seeking validation? Because those two things feel very similar on the surface, but they come from entirely different places. Reconnection requires effort, vulnerability, honesty, a willingness to face the discomfort of past mistakes and genuinely do better. It's someone showing up with clarity, not confusion. Someone who has thought about what went wrong, what they truly want now, and what they're prepared to offer. Validation, on the other hand, is quick. It's shallow. It's impulsive, and it's often selfish. It's not about you, it's about him, about how he feels in this moment, about easing his uncertainty, calming his ego, confirming his place in your heart. It's not about building something new, it's about proving to himself that he hasn't been erased from your world. People seek validation for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes they're lonely, bored, curious. Sometimes they're having a rough day and they want to feel wanted again. Or maybe they're not getting the attention they hoped for from someone new, so they fall back on the person they know once cared deeply, you. And if you respond, if you entertain it, even just a little, he gets what he came for. That one message, that hey, stranger, or that random comment he threw your way. It's like a fisherman tossing a line in the water. He's not even sure he wants to catch anything, but if something bites, it's a quick ego boost, a hit of significance. A reminder that you're still there, still emotionally available, still holding the door open. This isn't always done maliciously. It's not necessarily part of some grand strategy. A lot of people don't even realize they're doing it. They confuse their own craving for validation with genuine feelings. They tell themselves they miss you, but they're really missing the version of themselves they felt like when they were with you. Or they miss how you made them feel desired, important, admired. It's very possible to miss the feeling without wanting the reality back. So he reaches out, not because he's done the work or truly wants to start over, but because he wants to know if you still want him, if you're still reachable, if he can still spark something in you. And once he gets that signal, your response, your excitement, your curiosity, he feels better. He feels seen, and then in many cases he disappears again. Not because you did something wrong, but because he never intended to reconnect in the first place. He wasn't showing up with purpose. He was just looking for reassurance. This can be incredibly damaging if you don't recognize it for what it is, because it reopens wounds you've worked so hard to heal. Ahoy? It pulls you back into that emotional limbo where everything is uncertain again. It restarts the cycle of questioning, analyzing, overthinking, all because someone wanted a few seconds of emotional validation and you mistook it for reconnection. One of the biggest signs that someone is seeking validation rather than reconnection is the absence of real effort. If he doesn't ask about how you're really doing, if he doesn't acknowledge what happened between you, if he doesn't take responsibility or offer any clear intention, he's not trying to build anything. He's trying to feel something quickly and painlessly. That's not intimacy. That's ego maintenance. Another sign is the lack of follow-through. He sends one message, maybe two. You respond. You think the door might be reopening, and then silence. Or it fizzles, or he starts acting like he was just being friendly, and you were the one who read too much into it. This is a classic tactic for people who want the benefits of emotional access without the cost of emotional commitment. They want to know they still matter to you, but they don't want to matter in return. There's also the timing. He reaches out when he knows you're starting to move on. When you're finally not chasing, when your social media looks like you're glowing again, when he senses that you're not as emotionally available as you once were, that's when the message comes through. Not because he's been thinking about the relationship deeply, but because your distance makes him question his significance. Validation-seeking behavior thrives on your previous investment, on the fact that you used to care, used to try, used to be available at the drop of a hat. He remembers that. And in moments of insecurity, he wants to tap back into it, not to rebuild, but to refill his tank. It's not about mutual growth or love. It's about a quick hit of he still mattered to her. and you might be tempted to give it because you're kind, you're open-hearted. Because part of you still hopes that maybe this is the beginning of something real. But this is why clarity is your protection. If he's not showing up with effort, intention, and consistency, it's not reconnection. It's just a pit stop on his way to feeling better about himself. Your response sets the tone, expanded, when someone reappears after a period of silence, especially after you've been in no contact. It's easy to feel like the ball is suddenly back in their court. Like now you have to decide what this moment means. But the truth is you have more power than you think. And what most people don't realize is that your very first response sets the tone for everything that happens next. It's not just about whether you reply or not. It's how you reply. It's the energy you bring to that moment. The standard you communicate, the self-respect you embody, because that initial interaction doesn't just open a conversation. It tells the other person what kind of access they now have to you. If he sends a "Hey stranger" message and you jump in with warm emojis, nostalgia, and an open-ended invitation to talk more, you're not just being kind, you're signaling availability. You're showing him that despite the distance, despite the silence, despite everything that's gone unspoken, you're still right there emotionally. That you're still open to engaging, still holding space, still hoping for something. Whether that's true or not, that's the impression he walks away with. And that impression shapes the dynamic from that moment forward. It doesn't mean you can't be friendly. That's what created the silence in the first place. So when they finally break it, your response becomes a mirror. It reflects whether all that growth has translated into new standards, or whether they can still access the old version of you with a single text. Your tone becomes your boundary. Your pace becomes your filter. Your response becomes the message, long before any actual conversation begins. No contact is powerful. Don't undermine it. Expand it. No contact is not just about blocking someone on your phone or unfollowing them on social media. It's not about anger, punishment, or playing games. It's about creating space, real, intentional space, so that you can begin to detach from something that was hurting more than it was helping. And that decision, while painful, is one of the most powerful moves you can make when you've been emotionally wrapped up in someone who couldn't or wouldn't meet you where you were. The power of no contact isn't in the silence itself. It's in everything that silence represents. It says, I choose peace over chaos. I choose clarity over confusion. I choose self-respect over half-love. That's not easy, especially when your heart is still invested, or when you're used to being the one who reaches out, fixes things, or tries to make sense of the mess. But every day you don't reach out, you're retraining your nervous system. You're telling yourself, I don't need to chase love. I don't need to beg for validation. I can exist without this person. That's not cold, that's healing. It's you stepping out of emotional dependence and into self-ownership. And here's what often happens. Just as you start to get stronger, when the fog starts to lift, when the constant overthinking begins to slow down, that's when they show back up. Not always with a grand gesture. Sometimes it's just a like, a random message, a late night, hey, been thinking about you. And suddenly, all that silence feels fragile. You're caught between the part of you that misses them and the part of you that remembers why you had to let go in the first place. This is where the real test begins, because it's not hard to go no contact when the other person is gone too. The challenge is when they come back, and you have to decide whether the silence still matters. Whether the version of you who chose peace is still in charge, or whether the version of you that just wants to feel something again takes over. Undermining no contact isn't always about sending a long text or picking up the phone. Sometimes it's in the way you respond to their reappearance. It's letting a tiny message stir up a storm inside you. It's checking their profile for clues. It's replying with too much hope or giving them immediate emotional access again without any accountability or clarity on their end. That's how the work you've done can quietly start to unravel. And it's so tempting because you miss them. Because you want to believe this time it's different, because silence is lonely, because you're human. But here's the truth, if nothing has changed and you let them back in too easily, you're not just breaking no contact, you're breaking a promise to yourself, the promise that you would protect your heart, that you wouldn't settle for inconsistency, that you would stop allowing someone to come and go as they please. People often think no contact is about getting the other person to change. They treat it like a strategy. If I stop reaching out, Maybe he'll realize what he lost and come back. But that mindset keeps you tied to the outcome. It turns your healing into a waiting game. Real no contact isn't about getting a reaction. It's about creating the conditions for you to detach from the need for one. Because if you're still measuring the success of no contact by whether or not they come back, you're not actually free. You're still holding the door open emotionally. You're still living in reaction to them. And that's where your power leaks. The real shift happens when you stop doing no contact to change them and start doing it to reclaim you. And let's be honest, if they do come back and you're not clear on why you chose silence in the first place, it's easy to get swept right back into the old pattern. Because comfort is seductive. Familiar pain can feel safer than unfamiliar growth, but that pattern is the very thing you were trying to escape. That emotional tug of war, that roller coaster, that dynamic where you're always wondering where you stand. No contact interrupts that, it stops the bleeding. It gives you time to remember who you were before the confusion. It creates a boundary where there was only chaos. That's why it works, not because it manipulates someone into coming back, but because it gives you enough space to come back to yourself. And if you decide to break that silence, it needs to come from a place of strength, not desperation. It should be a conscious choice, not a reactive one. Are you responding because there's been real change, real effort, real ownership? Or are you responding because you're craving connection, and this is the easiest source of it? That's the distinction most people miss. It's not about whether or not you talk again. It's about whether your silence gave you clarity, whether it taught you anything about your own standards, your own value, your emotional patterns, the parts of you that have been looking for love in people who only offer pieces of it. When you undermine no contact too soon, you skip over the transformation that was trying to take place. You interrupt your own emotional reset. You reach for something before asking whether it's actually good for you this time. And you send a message to yourself and to them that your boundaries are flexible. That access to you is still easy, even if nothing's different. That all it takes to re-enter your life is a moment of attention, not a pattern of effort. No contact is one of the few ways you can truly shift the dynamic with someone who's been inconsistent. It's not about silence for the sake of silence. It's about choosing not to engage with what's been hurting you. It's about giving your heart room to breathe, letting your mind reset, letting your soul detach from something it's been clinging to, even if it knows deep down it wasn't working.